Hello, this is the Truth Seeker 333, and I trust you're doing well. Prayers for healing for everyone, and strength and vigor and courage. And so we're going to pick up right where we left off at Job. Our last verse was Job chapter 35, verse 2. And now we have Job chapter 35, verse 13, which reads, "Surely God will not hear vanity, neither will the Almighty regard it." And the operative phrase is, God will not hear. And what is the Hebrew word for God in this verse? It is El, and specifically is used in this manner. Lo yeshama El. Yo yeshama El. The first part of the Hebrew phrase lo is what negates the action. So in other words, the opposite of, or is not, or none. In other words, shema being the verb, the Hebrew verb for hearing. And then with the prefix ye is the pronoun he. So he hears, yeshama, but put the lo in front of it and you get not he hears. So he does not hear. Lo shema el. God does not hear. And we're translating in the English, of course, with the actor of the sentence, God. We're putting at the front of the sentence in English, we're saying God will not hear. So the verse, behold, God is surely God will not hear vanity, neither will the Almighty regard it. Now the second part of this verse is the usage of the word Almighty, which we see used throughout the book of Job, which is Shaddai. And so the other God word in this verse is Shaddai. And my note here is actually just says, also note the use of the Shaddai in the same verse, which is that pattern that we've been seeing throughout the book of Job, where we see Va'el, Vashaddai, using it in parallelism. And so let's move on to the next verse, which reads in Job chapter 36, verse 5, "Behold, God is mighty and despiseth not any. He is mighty in strength and wisdom." And the phrase we're saying here is, behold, God. And so in the Hebrew it is hen el. Hen el. And we see the little dash in between those two, connecting them together, which again I've said is the I believe it's called the makef, and it is a stress notation in the Masoretic text, and we might get into that a little more. But the simple translation is behold, God. And I don't have too much notes here on these next few ones here. So moving on to the next verse is chapter 36, Verse 20 through verse 22, we see the same thing. We're seeing a parallel usage again of behold God exalteth by his power, who teacheth like him. Again, Chen El, behold God. Job chapter 36, verse 26. Again, we see this same usage. Behold, God is great, and we know him not. Neither can the number of his years be searched out. Hen El, behold God. And Job chapter 37, verse 5. God thundereth marvelously with his voice. Great things doeth he, which we cannot comprehend. And in the Hebrew it is Yaram El. Yaram, or Yaram. It's with the saray there underneath the ayin. Yaram El. Literally, he thunders. God. But we say God thundereth in the English. Do I have any notes here? No. Moving on to verse 37, or chapter 37, verse 10. By the breath of God, frost is given, and the breath of the waters is straightened. And in the Hebrew, it is Minishmat El. Minishmat or Minishmot El. So we know that the word for soul in Hebrew is neshama. And so when we say by the breath of God, the root of that is the word for soul. So it is minishmat el. So, or you can understand that as by the soul of God or by the Spirit of God. Well, spirit would be ruach, but nishmat is the soul of God. Literally, you could also translate this as his wonders of God, or something to that effect. My notes say God's wondrousness, or wonders above all other wonders which God performed, translated mostly as the wondrous works of God. This is an example of how the plural in Hebrew can elevate a thing or a characteristic. So, in other words, we're seeing the plural of this, which is, it's not nishama, it's oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong note. That's the next one here. So let's go over that one. So chapter 37, verse 14. Hearken unto this, O Job, and stand still and consider the wondrous works of God, which in the Hebrew is Nifliot El. Okay, and so the plural is liot, nifliot, ending in the tav, signifies the plural, and so when we see the plural, it is signifying an elevation of the concept. So it's not just wonders, but it's wonders of wonders, and that kind of an idea. So nifliot el, the wondrousness of God, or the wondrous works of God. And so moving on to Job chapter 38, verse 41, it reads, "Who provideth for the raven his food, when his young ones cry unto God, they wonder for lack of meat." And so we've gone over this particular phrasing before, which is in the Hebrew, unto God, el, and connected by the makef to stress, to indicate the stress of how to say the phrase. But in the original, the makef most likely wasn't there. And my note is just stating that in verse 1 of chapter 38, that it is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh who is speaking, the Lord. And so we see the usage of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, and then we see the usage of El in the same passage. Again, a parallelism. And then Job chapter 40, verse 9 reads, "Hast thou an arm like God, or canst thou thunder with a voice like him?" And the phrase in English that we're looking at is like God. And in the Hebrew it is Ka'el. And this is a prefix attached to the front of the title God with the Kaf, letter Kaf, and simply one word, in this instance, Ka'el, like God. And my note here is just saying that, note the reference to the arm of God, which is a messianic reference. This is also something talked about a lot by the rabbis. The arm of God is the Messiah. And also note the voice which thunders, which is a reference to God's voice at Mount Sinai. And so, which is interesting because a lot of people would say that the book of Job was written before Moses. This could be a hint that maybe it was written after, because it says here, note the basically the voice that thundereth, and so we know that could be a reference to the thunderings at Mount Sinai. Just an interesting note to think about. Job chapter 40, verse 9 reads, "He is the chief of the ways of God. He that made him can make his sword to approach unto him." And the phrase that we're looking at is the ways of God, which in Hebrew is darchi el, Darchi El. And, or you could say Darchei El. The root of that word is Derek, which is the way. So if you know somebody whose name is Derek, in the Hebrew, it is the way. And of course, we know about the way is a very prominent phrase in the book of Acts as well. But this is a plural, but it also ends with the yod, which is E, the E sound. So it's darchi or darchei, which is like, because what I've been seeing is that it seems to note the possession of the plurality to the actor of the sentence. In this case, the ways of God, Darchei El. And Psalm, okay, so we're done with the book of Job. Let's see where we're at as far as time on this. Okay, so we got a little more time, so let's continue on here. We'll start off in Psalms with chapter 5, verse 4, which reads, "For thou art not a God that hath pleasure in wickedness, neither shall evil dwell with thee." And the English is not a God that hath pleasure. You remember the phrasing for not or none was the word lo. When you put the word lo in front of something, it negates it. So in this case, we're saying lo el chafetz. And lo el chafetz. So not a God who takes pleasure. And so going on to Psalm chapter 7, verse 11, it reads, "God judges the righteous, and God is angry with the wicked every day."
Wow.
And the phrase is "and God," which is simply va'el, and God. And in the first part of this, we also see the word God. God judgeth. But that word for God is Elohim. Okay? So, again, we see two different Hebrew words in the same psalm being used for God. We see El and we see Elohim. Now, in the Hebrew, specifically, what I'm saying is note the use of Elohim in the first part of this verse, signifying that El is referring to Elohim. Okay? Let's just take a quick look at the whole Hebrew just to see the prefix usage on the verb. And I'm looking at it, and it is just the word Elohim. It's not Va Elohim, as I was suspecting, but no, it's Elohim. And then we see Va'el and later on in that verse. So let's move on to the next psalm, which is Psalm chapter 10, verse 11. he hath said in his heart, God hath forgotten. He hideth his face, he will never see it. And the phrase that we're looking at is, God hath forgotten. In the Hebrew, it is shachak el. Shachak el. Okay? I don't have any notes on that, so we'll move on to Psalm chapter 10, verse 12, which reads, Arise, O Lord, O God, lift up thine hand, forget not the humble. And there are two words in this psalm for the title Lord or God. The first one is Yud He Vav He, and the second one is El. Okay. Now in the English King James Version it says Arise, comma, O Lord, semicolon, O God, comma. But in the Hebrew it's simply Kuma Adonai El. Okay, or Kuma, if you want to say Yehovah El, but in the Orthodox tradition, we pronounce the sacred name of God as Adonai. So, Kuma Adonai El, and in the Hebrew prayers, this is a very a significant part of the prayer liturgy, which is Kuma Kuma Adonai El. I'm trying to remember the melody, but I'll have to come back to that. But Arise, Yud He Vav He, God, in the English, but in the King James it's Arise, O Lord, O God. But in the Hebrew it is more of a title that is connected, Adonai El. And I'll have to get more into the characteristics of the Lord in this particular usage. But my note is simply, notice the use of the tetragrammaton. Excuse me. Give me a little water here. Notice the use of the tetragrammaton with the title El. Also notice that Yud He Vav He serves as the prefix in the compound rather than the suffix. The El normally serves as the prefix in compound names of God, such as El Shaddai. In this case, we see the Adonai El. Real quick, let's take a look at our time left for this video. And we've got a little more time, so let's see here. Let's go on to Psalm 16, verse 1, which states, Miktam of David, preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust. And the Hebrew for preserve me, God, is Shamreni El. Shamreni El. And I don't have any notes on that. So moving on to Psalm chapter 17, verse 6, it reads, I have called upon thee, for thou wilt hear me, O God. Incline thine ear unto me, and hear my speech. And the phrase we're focusing on in the English is, for thou wilt hear me, O God. which in the Hebrew is ki ta'aneni, ki ta'aneni, ta'aneni el, ki ta'anan. This is a tricky one. Ki ta'ani el. And I'm sure I didn't say it quite correctly, but I did my best. So moving on to Psalm 18, verse 2, it reads, "The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation, and my high tower." And so, of course, the first part of this verse has the sacred name of God, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, the Lord is my rock. But the phrase that we're looking at here is my God, which in the Hebrew is Eli, Eli, which ends with the possessive, which is the personal possessive form ending in E. Like if you were to say my father, well, if you say father, it's Av. If you say my father, it's Avi. Okay? If you say God, it's El. If you say my God, it's Eli. My God, Eli. So my notes here are, note the use of Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh in the first part of the verse, which signifies that the usage of Eli, my God, refers back to Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh. Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh is my God. The parallel usage of the two different titles. And I think we are just about out of time here. I have been going a little bit quicker in most of my videos. We have room for one more, so we will do Psalm 18, verse 30, which reads, "As for my God, his way is perfect. The word of the Lord is tried. He is a buckler to all those who trust in him." And the phrase that we're focusing on is "as for God," which in the Hebrew is Ha'el. And this one we have covered previously, but what I've stated is that this stands for the God. But in the Hebrew, it is a definite article. Ha is the definite article. Not necessarily understood as the all the time, but definitely referring to the definiteness of the article. In the King James Version, they're saying "as for God." In other words, in the English, when we say God, we know we're talking about the God. We're not just talking about any God. But in the Hebrew, it is Ha'el, which is emphasizing the definiteness of this God, which is the God above God, all gods. And my note is simply saying, quotes, the God, definite article of Ha, designates a specific God, which is God. The use of the definite article with El points to the non-distinct use of the word El. In other words, not just any God, but the God, or rather God himself, because we see in other verses where the title El can be referred to with regard to a foreign God or a lesser God. And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to say keep seeking truth. And I look forward to my next video. God bless you all. And peace be with you all. Shalom, shalom. All right. God bless.